So there's so many issues there. One is the way this mic is. This is going to the computer wirelessly. So anyway, there'd be major latency even if you were to get it on the speaker, and uske upar there'd be feedback. So you'd get that sound. I think.
This the most bizarre of.
No, we can't keep it open.
What
When
way?
you sit in one room and there are multiple people playing something like a Fortnite or a PUBG, that's when you get to experience the feedback and stuff coming.
Oh yeah,
Everyone is wearing a nice.
True. That's
Sir, just check
क्या
the video.
ये तो
Why is this
आपका
open?
रिकॉर्ड हुआ है वीडियो. अच्छा, we'll frame it, you know. So how do we see it, how it is right now? Oh, ये कौन? ये कब है? Oh.
थोड़ा नीचे करना है.
नीचे मतलब the screen.
हाँ.
I think that's good because you have the top of the thing also. So do we need to record with my phone or we can ditch that? Maybe this video looks good enough actually. I mean, unless you really have plans for HD YouTube
Shall I go live?
repurposing. I don't. Oh, is it? No, but are we ready with the
Yeah.
with this? We can't with this noise, no? बहुत ज़्यादा है.
It's a,
सच्ची में. It'll be a.
see, this is not a podcast, no.
Is
As
it
long
not a
as people
podcast?
get a value out of it.
हाँ.
बाद में वो clean up हो जाएगा जब वापस ये करना है. Live के लिए तो ठीक है.
I guess so. But I do feel the noise. So many people. This is on. I pressed a button by mistake. Does that mean something went wrong? इधर कुछ दबाया मैंने. सही. Cool.
Is this color?
Is it this? It's green. Yours looks light green. Oh, that's the.
बैठो अभी लाइव है.
पीछे रखना पड़ेगा. पक्का. This is too. This is really good.
हाँ?
You have a phone as the video that screens. So what tripod रखिए, if you take it will be a better quality.
Actually, the problem there is we need to figure out how to record the audio on.
These could connect to a phone in theory.
Essentially, if a phone acts as the webcam.
I agree. Yeah. If we had a Mac, we could do that. Use the iPhone as the webcam and do it. But I think we don't have a way right now.
ठीक है, लाइव जाए.
Is it? Are you sure?
Yes, आवाज भी कम हो गया.
Check. Hello. So where am I directing my hand?
Yeah.
To you?
Yeah, we'll have a conversation. and
ठीक
talk
है.
to everyone. Hi Gaurav.
Oh, the guitar's not showing up.
So welcome to another episode of Nomad Connect. We are doing this for the first time in Dharmkot.
Excellent.
And with a personality who has many voices. So the purpose of running Nomad Connect is to get people together, bring out interesting stories, um, connect interesting people, inspire people to, you know, take the road less traveled. And glad that you accepted the invite to be here.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
So please introduce yourself. I will speak less about you and let you speak more about yourself.
Sure. Whom am I speaking to? You, to the
You
camera,
are
to the
speaking to
lovely
the
people
world.
here?
So we are live on LinkedIn.
Sure. ठीक है.
And then there are these beautiful people from beautiful NomadGao community out here
Hi, everyone.
who are also listening to you. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm Gaurav Sajanhar. I'm a voiceover artist by profession. I used to be a corporate guy. I worked in New York and London in fintech. Then I moved to India and worked in product management after doing an MBA. And then at some point in 2015, I figured it was time for a switch. And I made a switch to, I thought I'll give it a shot. Let's see if, voiceover is something that can happen. And that's what I've been doing now for about 9 years. And, yeah. And
That's it.
I like to sing and write songs and play guitar, that sort of thing as well.
Nice, nice. So, tell more about your journey. You said that you grew up in multiple countries. So, did that affect your choice to be a voiceover artist eventually? And how was it when you were growing up in different cultures, different countries with different languages around?
Yeah, sure. And you're right. In fact, I did grow up moving a lot. My father was in the foreign service, so we moved to literally a different country every 3 years. So I was born in Delhi, moved to Geneva, then Bangladesh, then back to Delhi, then Moscow, then Bangkok, then the US for college, and so on. And it definitely impacted both this decision to be a voiceover artist, but also just who I am entirely as a person, right? Because that kind of upbringing certainly shapes you, because it gives you this sense of not really being from anywhere, belonging anywhere, but having to fit in everywhere, wherever you move. So I think that created this thing of, I think it was a survival mechanism as a kid, when you move somewhere, you're like, well, I want to belong, so you try to sound like the people around you. And yeah, so I think that's where this interest in languages and accents really began. But I don't think I ever imagined at that age, because it was just exciting for me, hearing all these and it was every 3 years there was a reset, right, of everything you knew. From your and you're a kid, you have no control over anything. You're suddenly just dropped into this new environment. And yeah, so it's, I think something about that difference in the way people sounded in different cultures really tickled my brain. So that was just fun for me. Yeah.
But were you conscious about, okay, there is a career called voiceover artist back then, or it just
I
came along?
think, so if I were to pick on like a couple of incidents from my childhood where I even vaguely thought about this. I remember one was, I think the biggest one was when I watched the movie Aladdin, Disney's Aladdin, where Robin Williams plays the genie character. So that was one that was supremely meaningful. It just blew me away. The way he used his voice. Robin Williams is a master of using his voice. And it was just amazing how many, within one song, he played sort of 15 different characters.
Wow.
And, or more, the way Robin Williams is. So I think that moment was big for me. I was like, wow, I want to be able to do that. So it was exciting for me to be able to just explore what my voice could do. And I think that's when I was aware that, oh, there's somebody behind these cartoons. There's somebody there, and that could be interesting.
Right.
And I think years later, when I was living in India for 3 years, you're watching cricket all the time. I was in like 6th or 7th grade, and cricket was very exciting. And I would hear all the voices in the middle being like, doing the promos or saying, powered by this, brought to you by this, whatever. And I would be like, yeah, I could say that. But it didn't seem like, obviously a career path really. But yeah, I think those are the times when I initially thought about it. Even in college, when I was in college in the US and I'd studied economics and computer science and was on a path to do, have a corporate life. But I remember looking in like a career guidebook kind of thing, in the library, and they had voice artist as an option. And then I read, I was like, is this something that I could do? And it was like, oh, it's very difficult. It's very few people can do it. And it's all, as in, you need to have connections and networks and, that's the only path, and a few people do it, and it's not a real job that you want to be doing. So I was like, okay, I think that was, yeah.
So you spoke about, uh, every 3 years having to reset your life, and then belongingness was one of the words that came through in
Yeah,
your
yeah.
previous, conversation. Uh, can you talk more about, uh, you know, that aspect of life and having to have a community, needing a community around you, or you just grew up accepting that it doesn't exist?
Yeah, I guess it's a deep question with a lot of layers to it. But yeah, I guess as a kid, you don't actually really, you don't know what you don't know, right? You're growing up and you believe it's normal to be transplanted constantly. Like I remember when I was in Delhi for 3 years and I asked this friend, I went to this friend's house and he was like, this is my house. And I was like, oh, what was your previous house? What was your next house? He was like, no, this is my house. This is it. This is where I've been and this is where I'm growing up and that's it. And that was like a flip for me. I was like, oh, acha, aisa bhi hota hai. So I think it's only later that you realize that, oh, in hindsight, that was a big deal, that you don't really have so that continuity in terms of childhood friendships, people who've known you your whole life. So, there's two sides to that coin. There's a lot of, you kind of inhabit that outsider role, right? Never fully belonging. But with time, then I've also been able to unpack, hey, there's some good things that came with that too. And as with anything, right, there are pros and cons.
Because this particularly interests me because I homeschool, me and my wife homeschool our kids, and we have been shifting houses, we have been changing places,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
we believe that travel is the best teacher. That's the hypothesis we have for ourselves. um, and you know i I always try to look in the future, thinking about how would our kids feel, looking back, not having a base and not having those
Yeah, yeah,
real
yeah.
friendships. But on the other side, we also feel that you build a stronger relationship with yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel that?
I think it varies from person to person, and what is also, I think it's great that you have the strong awareness of it for your kids, right? So that you can also then make that effort to compensate for
Right.
that, be aware that, oh, they do need some continuity of friendships. And
Right.
also, it's a different age, right? Like now, social media and connection is
Yeah.
much more accessible. Back then, it's not like I'm going to Skype somebody from Moscow and, it's just like, it felt like a very difficult thing to keep in touch. But yeah, I think as long as you're aware of it, and you can make up for the deficiencies that also come along with moving around so much, I think it's wonderful, man.
Great. So when you chose voiceover artist as your career, right? Um, did it happen overnight, or you had to prepare yourself for the move from the product management career, which obviously was more secure back then
For sure,
and
yeah.
paid decent money, and uh, then suddenly you get into something which you don't know how it works, right?
Absolutely. I don't think I was prepared for so many aspects of it, like when I got into it. But yeah, it was not. I think it had been brewing for a while. It's and I think you get to that point where you question, hey, why am I doing what I'm doing? How am I spending my hours in a day? And I think within the Indian corporate culture, especially, I think there was a part of me that also there felt like something is not quite right with, my alignment to who I would have to become to really thrive also in this kind of space. And so I think that thought had been there. I'm like, could I really explore something so random, which has no clarity and security? Has been something that has been a priority for us, most of us, I think, when we're brought up in Indian families, right? It's like, no, no, you get a good job and be on a secure path.
Settled and
Yeah. So it was a big deal. But I think at that time I'd had a surgery actually, an appendectomy, and I was laid up for like a month. And then I had time to be like, yeah, what am I doing? Should I just shake it up and try? What's the worst that could happen? So and I was in fact living in Thailand at the time. I was living in Phuket. So I had started working for Make My Trip after my MBA, and then I they bought this company in Phuket, and then they started sending me there, so I was there. So quitting and moving from there to Bombay, which I had zero experience with, was also a major culture shock, just in terms of everything about it, right? I can't imagine two places more
Right.
opposite. So yeah. So anyway, I just basically figured, what the hell? I was 30 at the time, and we didn't have sort of dependence or any that sort of thing. So I was like, all right, what's the worst that'll happen, right? So I think it got to that point where I was like, oh, I really want to try, but I'm so scared. It feels so foreign. And then it was just that thought of, hey, future you will look back at you and be like, you didn't even try. Like, come on, you were on the edge and you didn't even try. Well, just try. So that's how I think I took that call.
Yeah, as Jeff Bezos says, right? Regret minimization. Like you don't want to grow up and have those regrets sometime in the future that I could have done this.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great takeaway from this. Uh, Now, let's talk about your career as a voiceover artist. How do you make money? Because the title of this event is Making Money.
Which was not my intention, by the way, at all.
Yeah, that was clickbait.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
And
clickbait sells,
how do you find clients? How do they find you? How do you make sure that there is continuity in those relationships? Yeah, if you could speak a little more about it.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this thing. I think I'll also pick up from the previous one where you said, did it happen overnight? And because I think that is also instructive. I moved with a runway in mind. I moved saying that, hey, 9 months, I'll be in Bombay and see what happens. That's the amount of time I'll give myself. If nothing happens, we'll move on to something else.
Right.
And so then I had that sort of freedom to say that, do what you can in this time, just flail around, reach out to whom you can, see what sticks, just throw everything that you can find and see what sticks. And, funnily enough, the first day I landed in Bombay, I went out, some friends from business school were there. They were like, we'll go to a karaoke bar. We were hanging out there, and a friend of a friend was like, oh, I know the senior voiceover artist who's giving workshops on voiceover. He's just starting this thing out. Do you want me to connect you to him? So I'm like, yeah, of course. Like literally by chance, right? It's such a rare thing also to find voice artists giving lessons. And yeah, so I just went with that. So that started like a 7-week workshop on the craft of voiceover. So I think to answer your question also, there's two big blocks. One is the craft, and the second is the business, right? And those two things are both extremely important and both also very different. So I think, and both of those things sort of worked in tandem, as I figured it out. Yeah, so how did I grow it? How did I get started? First, it was just reaching out to networks, reaching out to contacts, just requesting meetings with people to be like, hey, can you advise me? Can you give me your thoughts? How does this work, right? It was just completely foreign to me. All I knew was, I like using my voice. Can I find somewhere where this can add value? In fact, even being a voiceover artist is such a kind of a misleading thing. You're kind of like a voiceover service provider. The art aspect there is a creative element, of course, but it's also very much a business transaction, right, when you're delivering this kind of product. Yeah, so reached out to people, honed my craft a bit. I think I already had reasonable comfort with audio equipment and stuff because I sang a lot through college. I sang in a cappella groups. I was, enjoying working on my own music, recording at home, stuff like that. So I had some grasp of the technicalities of it, which will become important later when you ask me about the remote working. So that was definitely a big pillar. Otherwise, yeah, so one fun story of one thing that really, I think, got things going was I managed to get an audition at Viacom in Bombay. And the Viacom runs all these channels from Comedy Central to VH1 to Colors to now all the Jio Cinema channels as well. And so I went in for an audition and they were like, Acha, this is a TV promo, here's the script. Do it this way, do it that way, do it with more feel, be more happy, be more whatever. And then they were like, hey, do you want to just do it your way? What do you think this script needs? And so it was something for VH1 Hollywood Film Awards. And I was like, oh, it's a Hollywood thing, so do you want an American accent on this? I could do an American accent. They're like, ha, kar lo. So I did my best American accent, which was honed during my college years. And
Why don't you speak next few sentences in American accent?
that'll be funny. It's also the context of whom you're speaking with so much determines, right? What comes out. Um, but yeah, sure, I can speak in my American accent too. But yeah, because you spend a lot of time speaking like this when you're talking to other Americans. And anyway, no, I'm feeling weird talking to you like this. But no, but it is really fun. So yeah, and then I got a call from the head of the channel being like, you know, that accent was really good. Do you think you could do that consistently? Because right now, you know, at that point of time, they were paying people sitting in the US and Canada to do these voiceovers for all these channels. Also because in India, we have this thing of like, oh, accented voices are premium, you know, for certain channels. It has this sort of foreign vibe, whatever. So I was like, yeah, make in India. Let's do it, you know, like I can do these voices. And so it sort of built from there. So that was a very interesting niche for me to discover. And honestly, I couldn't have asked for anything better, right? It was so crazy that that sort of came full circle from my childhood interest in accents and voices and so on. And even that was, it's one thing to do it playfully and enjoy it. It's another thing to sort of need it to be super accurate, right? Like it's one thing to have a few lines you can say in an accent. It's another thing to get a script and be able to know how each word should be authentically pronounced in that. So even that was interesting to develop techniques around that. You know, I would like have specific friends in my head for each accent and voice whom I would then sort of channel. So I had this one boss in London who's this lovely American guy from California. So he is the inspiration for my Comedy Central promo voice. So anytime I don't know how to pronounce something, I sort of hear his voice in my head and know. So it's been fun to figure out those kinds of techniques as well. So this was sort of just one bucket, right? I figured accented voiceovers and TV work. So this was a nice space to operate in, and that TV work led to voicing then for a lot of channels actually. So at one point, I was the voice of Comedy Central, of VH1, of Nickelodeon HD, of the Disney Channel, of Colors Infinity, and I was doing different characters sort of for each channel voice, that sort of thing. So that was very interesting, and I'm still, until TV survives, I'm still doing TV work, let's see. But then there are loads of other buckets, man. So I explored that, which is one space. I think there's a lot of verticals in voiceover, actually. So, I mean, I can talk more about those as well.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I'll just have a
Please
sip one second.
enlighten us.
Can you guys hear me? I know, because I'm facing here and it's so loud.
Yeah.
And if I shout, it'll just
So
screw me up.
can we set up a mic and speakers?
Oh, that'll be a separate mic. Maybe that could work. I don't know. Could try if it's an
Yeah,
option.
it could work. Till
Because-
then, I'll just check how's the LinkedIn Live going.
So this is another thing as a, so they call, as a professional voice user, as you're always just stressed out about, oh, I shouldn't shout too much, or I shouldn't overuse my voice, you know, because then I won't have access to the next few days. I went to a voice doctor once and he said, you know, if you treat your voice like a garbage truck, then your voice will sound like a garbage truck. You know, you take it out, you drive it everywhere, you drive it over bumps and rocks.
You can put up.
He was like, if you want to be this, you have to treat your voice like a Lamborghini. And you know, you only take it out for special occasions. And if it's loud around you,
We are taking a
Don't
couple
talk.
of minutes of technical break here, but stay there and then.
say, what are your names? If I may know. Huh? Lubina. Nice to meet you. Yes? Naval. Nice to meet you, Naval. And what about you? Sorry? Bhavna. Nice to meet you. Nice. Got some jams.
Now he's going to mix up the music and the song. Yeah.
Yeah, must be. Oh. Check. Hi. I have no idea how this is going to sound online now.
Yeah. Oh. Just Yeah.
Face it out into the valley and
Voice of God. That'd be nice. Don't you notice how-
Yes.
I think we'll have to take it back and forth. Yeah, I'm kind of trapped here. Can I thoda?
Yeah.
Don't you notice how I get quiet?
Is it better now?
when there's no-
Can everyone hear? That's great. Let's keep it like this.
No, when I speak, we'll move it here because it's a dynamic mic, so it'll have to be.
Right.
Huh.
Cool. So where were we?
I was talking, I think, about the different
Different verticals.
verticals in voiceover. Yeah, so that was also like an exploration, figuring out like just exploring this whole landscape, like what exists in voiceover.
Right.
So then over the course of that first year, and I was very grateful that, my networks were also able to help me with this kind of thing. But, wow, really competing with this rain today. So I, explored things so, okay, a few of the verticals are, one is there's dubbing, right? So dubbing in languages for movies, TV series, things like that. So that's a very specific kind of voice acting, right? That's literally voice acting. So that's a different skill where you have to not only be able to, read the script, emote as the character would be, but at the same time you have to watch the characters on screen in the studio. Yeah, and to the point of, like imagine it's an English thing being dubbed into Hindi. You go to the detail, the level of detail where you're like, oh, he's making a P sound with his mouth. Let's find a per word in Hindi to match that up. So it's a very different kind of craft. And it was really fun. Like I got to do a bunch of interesting things there as well. Like I voiced for, I don't know if you guys know the series The Crown on Netflix. So I played in the Hindi dub version, I was one of the characters in The Crown, the guy who marries, he's like this very, is this photographer who marries the sister of the queen. And in fact, fun story, there are scenes when he gets into threesomes in this show. And fun fact that you have to voice all the sounds that a character makes, in any context, not just what he's saying, but also the moaning and the kissing and the groaning and all that. And I had this lovely auntie directing me, outside the booth, and that was an extremely awkward situation to be in. But yeah, so dubbing is one vertical, and that was pretty fun. Of course, advertising is the big space, right? That is the most sort of iconic space you think of when you think of voiceover, and especially you think of voiceover earning you good money, right? Because as you explore all these verticals, you realize that as with any kind of, if you put a business framework on it, the kind of money you can expect to make as a service provider is proportionate to the kind of money that the person getting service from you is able to make, right? So for example, one's explored advertising, audiobooks. I've done a bunch of audiobooks. As I said, dubbing is a whole thing. And then like corporate is a huge space as well, right? Just doing these corporate films, be it explainers for startups, be it, sales pitches for insurance, for banks, for various products, you name it. So explored all of these spaces, got a sense of what are the price points we're looking at. How does pricing work, right? That was another completely different thing.
Right.
Because the pricing in this industry makes very little sense. It's sort of, and that's what also appealed to me about this industry was that the ROI on literally the ROI on the time spent can be really high. And like I remember in the very first voiceover I did, I went and I did read 3 pages out about like trucks or something. I don't know what it was, some AV, and I got paid 8,000 rupees for it. And I was so excited. I was like, I just showed up and read a few pages, and this is 8,000 bucks. It felt, like a big deal. And then I realized, oh, there are people charging many multiples, as you sort of get the right clients and into the right spaces, and see what you can also build a reputation in.
I'm just tired holding this.
Yeah, fair enough. Where was I? What were you saying?
Yeah. So many multiples of what you were earning,
Huh.
people are
So,
earning.
oh, right. So that can be interesting, right? So audiobooks. So it's an interesting example is audiobooks versus advertising. Audiobooks are hard work, right? Like doing audiobooks requires immense stamina. You're coming in every day for like 5, 6 days, recording for 3 hours on end, being able to be consistent. I think the stand is a good idea. No, no, it's the cable moving around. Yeah, I can. हाँ छोड़ दो बंद कर दो
बंद कर दो,
बंद बंद
बंद
बंद
पूरा बंद कर,
off it.
बंद कर दो, बंद. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Feels nice. What was I saying? I'm saying so audiobooks, for example, are a super taxing form of voiceover, right? It's fun kind of, doing storytelling, and I've had some fun stories around those as well. Like I've done the audiobook somehow. The first audiobook I did was the autobiography of Karan Johar.
wow.
An unsuitable boy was the name of the thing. I don't have any interest in Bollywood. I know nothing about Karan Johar. I watched like a few films when I was here in India for a few years, and I watched DDLJ Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, and that's about it. So I had no sense for like how can I do this justice. But it turned out to actually be really fun because telling his story was interesting. क्या हो रहा है? Some feedback, some noises coming. There's an
Yeah, that's the LinkedIn life.
okay, take it.
Yeah.
Cool, no stress.
We,
So, that was interesting. At one point, I did an audiobook on mindfulness. Exciting topic, right? And this was in the pandemic. And this book, I just kept procrastinating recording this book. Like, it was so painful to, if you go to a studio and you have something set up, then you're like, okay, I'm with someone. But just getting into my booth, which at that point, for many years, was a closet, right? So I would regularly go into, so that's a whole other topic of how I use closets and resizes and pillows to soundproof in any situation. But I found myself, reading this mindfulness book, and it was a weird situation where he was talking about procrastination in the book. So I was both the narrator and the audience. And I was like, oh yeah, I should totally apply this. Like what I'm reading out to myself is totally making sense. So that was a fun experience. But really, the kind of money you make on audiobooks versus advertising is just worlds apart, right? Audiobooks you'll make really a pittance because if you think about it, the business model is such that
yeah,
it's
if it
not.
sells, then you get a royalty.
No,
And
there's no concept of royalty. In India, the concept of royalties for voiceover barely exists. It exists in more mature markets like the US and the UK, and that's a big deal. But in India, there are different systems to try to help with compensating for something royalty specific. Like you'll get a multiple on your one-off payment. So, for example, so like I said, with audiobooks, the way you do the pricing is on per finished hour of audio. So imagine to record one finished hour of audio, you're spending at least an hour and a half. Because you're taking breaks, you're making mistakes, your stomach is growling, something is going on, right? So, and you'll make like whatever X number, right? It may be 5,000, 10,000, something. But in Indian context, I think it's really capped around there. And then you shift to advertising, where the kind of work you're doing, the value you're offering is totally different, right? In advertising, you may be saying a line, you may be saying 5 words. Right? I remember when I did my first advertising job and I said 5 words. It was literally like something where I was one character who was saying that I said 5 words. I don't remember what those 5 words were, but I wrote a bill for 10,000 for 5 words. And I came home and I called my mom. I was like, Mom, I said 5 words and I made 10,000 rupees. And she was very upset. She was like, this is not good. People should not pay you this much for doing no work. What is this nonsense you're getting into? And then I went, but the fun thing about this equation is when I went back the next day to do the same 5 words in Hindi, and then I wrote another bill for 10,000 rupees. And then, say, for example, this ad gets used in multiple mediums, right? So it's not just a TVC, but it's also cinema, or radio, and online, OTT, etc. Right? So then you'll multiply that same fee by 4x.
wow.
Exactly. And then if you have something like, you have something called cut downs. So you record an ad for a 30 seconder, but they'll use it for a 15 seconder, 10 seconder, a 5 seconder as well. Then you'll get multiples for that. So that's great, right? Like that, from the voiceover artist perspective, you're like, wow, I can just show up and do this one thing and potentially. Of course, the challenge is getting that kind of work.
Right.
But this is just actually to demonstrate the difference across verticals, right? Like how pricing can really, really vary. So it's been interesting to explore all these different spaces. And um, every vertical rewards a different kind of skill set,
Right.
right? So if you're doing this dubbing thing, it has constraints, which are that you have to be in the studio. You can't do it remotely, right? Because it's really detail oriented, and because it's going on Netflix, etc. They're very um, they're NDAs. It's very controlled with you can't even leave with the script, etc. So it's a very different thing, and you have to be good at that kind of acting part of it. But if you're maybe in TV, like channel voicing stuff that I do, there you don't necessarily have to go to the studio if you have that relationship with people, and they also trust that you can deliver what's needed. Um, but your availability has to be much higher. So you may like need something turned around in an hour, in half an hour, something of that sort. So there are different constraints with all these different
Right.
verticals. So that's been fun to explore and figure what works for me. What, yeah.
Yeah. So you spoke about remote work here, right?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I can imagine that most of the industry is sitting out there in big cities,
Hmm. Hmm, hmm.
right? Particularly Mumbai and
Sure.
maybe Delhi
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
some extent. How do you manage to work remotely? What are the, you know, uh, what are the choices you have to make to be able
Hmm.
to work remotely in this
Hmm.
industry?
Hmm. 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 So I think acceptance of remote work in voiceover in India has been relatively recent. In fact, before the pandemic, when I was doing a lot of this channel work, I was trying to persuade my clients, be like, let me do it remotely, especially because I was excited that I have access to this gear, I'm interested in making this space, and I really wanted that flexibility. That was actually what made me quit, right? I told you, like, I didn't own my time in the corporate world. It felt like I had really very little control over it. So I was always, from the outset, I was designing with this goal of flexibility. Um, so it started with some clients, and so one fun thing is to be able to record remotely. So you have two remote work situations, right? One is work remotely from home, and the other is work remotely from anywhere. And these are two different problems in terms of the kind of equipment you'll use, in terms of what you're solving for. So, like living in Bombay, it's a noisy, crowded city, right? It's very hard to find a space where you'll just have like silence, right? Especially if you're living in a central part of the city. So anytime I would look for a home, I would go with the brokers and I would go in their various rooms and I would just shut all the doors and listen. And the broker was like, "What's wrong with this guy?" He's like, "It's so quiet." I was like, "No, I can hear that auto putt-putting down that road. I can hear that construction. I can't live here." So anyway, it's hard to find a home in Bombay. Uske upar I had all these constraints. So that was definitely a big part of it. Because the reality is, once you get into soundproofing, and I've been through all the parts of exploring all the gimmicks, all the things that you're like, oh, use this thing and put your mic inside this box and something, and you'll get,
Or eight trays?
yeah, egg trays don't work at all. Egg trays are a complete scam. Um, but and it started out with how can I convert any cupboard into a studio booth? And for many years, I operated that way. I had like my own patent pending technique to convert it into a studio thing. But there'd be a bunch of cushions and pillows inside. There'd be like a razai around the hanging thing that would come out behind me and in Bombay heat, recording under a razai and in this thing, I would really come out off the closet like drenched in sweat, like I'd come out doing some hard labor. But
I hope that was not an audiobook recording
it
for
was when
once.
the audiobook once the year like, yeah, to get challenging for sure. But yeah, I swore off audiobooks. I did 4 audiobooks, and I was like, this is it.
But is
Um,
it because of the money part of it or the intensity part of it?
it's obviously both. Like you can enjoy the intensity as well, and I did in many cases. But ultimately you have to draw a line and say, hey, what is worth it for me? Where am I going to invest? Yeah, scaling up on the audiobook front was not interesting to me for that reason. Because I was like, this doesn't give me that flexibility that I'm trying to design for, you know. So, go on.
Yeah. So you spoke about two scenarios, right?
Hmm.
Recording from home and from anywhere. So
Yeah.
the home part, you have your patent pending technique.
And now you'll be happy to hear it's evolved from a closet to a proper booth. Now, I'm no longer in the closet. So that's nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, and on the road, as you were saying.
Yeah, on the road is something because most of the audience here um, are digital nomads, or they want to be digital nomads. They want to make money from money on the go, and I'm curious to know how you do that so that I can improve
For
my
sure.
voice and start making money on the go.
Man, if it just craft and business. So I think a lot of being able to record on the go is actually having that trust with your clients, right? Somebody has to believe that you can deliver something, with quality. So I think initially it was really those long-term relationships that served me to be able to. So as I said, with this channel work, I slowly persuaded them to be like, "What do you want me to come down, to record 5 lines? Let me just send it to you." And slowly, as they started trusting that, oh, the quality is fine, this is totally workable. And there was a lot of hit and miss for me as well, even for my home setup. Then they were like, that just became the way one operated. And then the pandemic hit, right? So the pandemic, suddenly it was a great advantage to have this home setup, which maybe more established voice artists at the time didn't have in the same way. So that was also helpful. Um, Now coming to traveling and recording. So first, of course, doing it remotely in the first place is a challenge, can be extra challenging because you don't get live feedback,
Right.
right? You'll record something, you'll send it to them. They'll, worst case scenario, they'll be like, oh, I have to talk to the client, somebody, they'll come back with a bunch of feedback. You'll get 3, 4 voice notes. Saying, "Arey, feel nahi aa rahi, yaar, ye to flat hai, ye to waisa hai, waisa." And then you'll be like, okay, I'll record this again. And you can go into a lot of those iterations. So I think managing that also has been interesting to be like, okay, this is pointless. How do I solve for this? So then I try to get clients on a call first, with the final client, because generally as a voiceover artist, I'm working with a production house or an agency, not necessarily with the final client, right? So get on a call and try to create a studio kind of situation where I'll say, hey, let me read this out to you, and you give me feedback, and then so we can co-create the tone, the feel, the pacing, whatever we want, and then I can go and give a bunch of options on that. So now, even in this, there are a couple of things, right? Both, one is gear and one is space. So when I'm traveling, I always have to think about what kind of space. The same way when I'm renting a home, but also when I'm traveling to any hotels, like hostels are not an option because I can't tell people, hey, shut up, I'm doing a recording. And also I look ridiculous when I'm doing a recording from a hotel because I literally take all the pillows, create like a little thing to put my microphone inside, and then put the razai over my head, and I'm like kneeling next to the bed with like a cushion under my knees, and I'm like under this thing and doing all my recordings. And yeah, so I need privacy and ideally some kind of soundproof space, or at least a quiet space, right? So that consideration is there of space. And then I've been evolving in terms of gear. I really enjoy obsessing over buying new gear and exploring different things. So that has been fun as a journey. And now I think I've settled on. So I have remote gear for two different kinds of situations as well. One is, if I'm in my hotel room and I have time with my laptop with this USB mic and all that. Then I have gear for if I'm out on the go in the middle of the day. I have a super tiny mic that I can plug into my phone, and in an emergency scenario, ideally I would not use that, but so trying to design for all those different situations has been interesting. And slowly my gear has also been shrinking as I've figured out only what I really need, what is essential. So yeah, so that's been interesting. But then working with people remotely is a totally different thing.
Right. So yeah, throw some light on that part, right? Working with people remotely, making sure that you know, as you said, trust is not just as a voiceover artist, but for any kind of remote work to work, I think
Absolutely. Yeah.
trust is very important. Uh, but now let's come to the elephant in the room, right?
Hanji.
AI.
Oh, sure. Huh.
So, how is AI impacting your career as a voiceover artist?
So I don't know yet. It's honestly, it's very confusing at this point, and it's uncertain which path it's going to go down. It will affect things for sure. That I know. I fully expect a lot of the work that I do to just, in fact, I have it in my contracts now that you cannot use the voiceovers I give you to generate a, AI voice model. Um, I think the way, at least based on my current understanding, the way it will affect the industry is first, a lot of the low value work will just go to AI voicing, right? So the things you guys hear like IVRs, right? Like, welcome to NomadGao. Press one for
Yeah,
reception, this, that. There's no need to have a human saying that, and fair enough, right? Anyway, like, funnily enough, you're trying to sound robotic almost in that situation as a human.
yeah,
So that kind of work, a lot of work like e-learning work, training videos, stuff like that, that will largely go to AI because the quality of AI will be good enough. And again, I think the equation always adds up to what kind of money is being made. What are the budgets in any context? So if you're like a big brand advertising on TV, you probably don't want an AI voiceover because you're investing a lot of money in this ad campaign. You'd rather invest that money in the voiceover and have it hit and make those crores in income, that you
right.
expect from selling your motorbikes or washing powder or whatever. But if you're somebody making a little like digital ad on Instagram for your product, maybe you're fine having an AI voiceover and you don't care to have, it depends on what your priorities are.
Right.
And even though you can pick up, right, at least so far you can pick up when it's an AI voice, mostly. But I don't know if you guys have seen these new ChatGPT 4.0 demos that they put out, where ChatGPT now actually has a voice and it's insane. It's like it has a personality. It's laughing, it's teasing you, it's having a full-on conversation based on what it sees of you also. So it's I can't predict how that's going to go. I know one thing that will happen probably is that maybe as a business model, um, I as a voice I as a voiceover artist would have my own AI voice model, and I would say, hey, if you want to use me for marketing purposes, and if you need it for like e-learning or something else, some long form thing, what AI voiceover will do, I don't have to get involved. You can just put in the script and you'll get this AI voice in my voice. So in theory, you'll have those two business models going concurrently. But man, I don't know how it's going to play out because also it depends on. I think the gatekeepers are changing, right? The people who are holding the power in terms of who gets the work is changing. Suddenly, with this new middleman, this new player of like an AI voice agency, now it'll depend on which voiceover artists they work with, right? Up until now, the path was, oh, you're a voiceover artist, you're connected to a production house or an agency, maybe to a client, and that's it, and they know you, and that's the way you get your work. Um, yeah,
Does this make you anxious, and how do you deal with those anxieties?
a lot of things make me anxious. I guess AI makes me anxious too, somewhat. Um, I guess it's one of those things that you have to just wait and see and do what you can, right? So I went to a voiceover conference. There's an association of voice artists in Bombay, and I went to a conference they had entitled AI Threat or Boon. And the major takeaway was like, this is a threat. Very little boon involved in this situation from a voiceover artist perspective. Like, it's crazy, right? The level of things, and we had producers in this conference panel telling us that the entire dubbing industry, for example, is likely to evaporate because say, I don't know, some dude playing an Avenger, what's his name, the guy who plays Iron Man, he will create an AI voice model that can then be used for the Hindi dub, for the Indonesian dub, for the Chinese, for the French, and it'll be his voice
But
being
wouldn't it
done by
make it
AI.
boring?
It depends on how good the AI is, right? And if it can take, because it works in crazy ways, right? It can actually, so in fact you have this thing also that I as a voiceover artist could be doing the recording, and then that other character's voice model will be superimposed onto my delivery. So it won't be Gaurav's voice, but it'll be Gaurav's inflection and expression,
Wow.
but it'll be the tone of the original actor. So I mean, it's crazy, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
it
it's
is. It
insane.
is.
So I think we're also just along for the ride, and the only thing to do is go with the flow of it and see what you can do and learn what you can about AI, right? Like, because as we all know, this is the super major shift that's happening, and you might as well get involved and learn what you can and then see where it goes. But yeah, I mean, I don't pretend to be on top of this thing by any means. I definitely need to do a bit more.
So you also mentioned in our last conversation that
Mm,
you have this really unique way of dealing with the self-development or
mm,
anxieties or things that you don't like about. You write
mm.
songs and poems on that. So how did it came through?
Yeah, I guess this is not a voiceover related thing at all, but
Yeah.
it's one of those creative outlets that has been really fun for me over the last few years. So it actually came about. So I'm a self development, for a personal development nut. Like I'll obsess about a lot of these things, and then I won't really necessarily apply them. Right? It'll be great. I love ingesting all this information, and then but application is a totally different thing. So this happened to me in the pandemic. I was journaling one day in an old journal, and I was like in this space where I was like problem solving and identifying all the insights about what's wrong in my life and what I need to do. And as sketched it all out, I was like, great, now I just have to do all this shit. And then I turned the page back, and it was a few pages prior was like an entry from 2 years ago. And I read that, and it was all the same stuff. And of course, like I must have evolved somewhat, but a lot of the core issues were the same. And I felt like, wow, what a waste of all that effort and insight, right? Like I knew all this, and then I just had amnesia about it, and now I'm going through that loop again. Wouldn't it be great if I had some way to bring this kind of insight, this information to the forefront of my mind, right? And actually be present with it and in theory apply it. So then this thought came that, hey, why don't I make this insight or this thing into a song? And it came from this idea that marketers use music to get stuff into our subconscious all the time, right? Like jingles about washing powder Nirma or like some Cadbury Dairy Milk or something, right? And it'll be stuck in your head. You'll be singing it all day. Like I grew up on that song, Doodh, 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 Wonderful Doodh, right? I was singing that thing for years, and there's emotion attached to it, rather than if I were just saying the words, Doodh, 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 Wonderful Doodh, right? Like that song, it has some sort of different power. So I was like, well, why don't I use this same concept of jingles, of catchy music, to bring stuff that I actually want to sell to myself or keep in my brain, bring into my consciousness. And I call them wisdom jingles. This is the term I made for them. And yeah, it was a really fun journey actually. And it's still something I use now as a tool for self-development. In fact, it started out from so in the pandemic, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this app called Clubhouse. So that was a pretty big deal, especially as a voiceover artist, because it's a very isolated field, right? You're just working in your own studio. You're not interacting with other voiceover artists much. It's a rare thing. And suddenly on Clubhouse, I had voiceover artists from around the world, all collaborating and all hanging out in these voiceover rooms and playing characters and doing things. It was really fun. And one day I met a couple of Indian guys, one Indian guy from Hong Kong and one Indian guy from the UK. And they were doing all these foreign accents and characters and things. And I had this feeling of like, dude, this was my thing. Like I was supposed to be the Indian guy who's doing all these, accented voices, and these guys are better than me. Like and I was a little disappointed, and I journaled about this, and that led to my very first wisdom jingle, which was just like a 30-second thing because I was like Instagram Reels.
Guitar is
That's true. So I could play some of these for you. I'll share a bit more about them. But yeah, it was basically this idea of can I use music as like a functional tool to do better in life, like actually align with the way I want to live. And sometimes it would even be for, you're scrolling on Instagram, following people that you really respect and have really great things to say. And I would read like quotes and be like, yes, this is what I want to apply in my life. I'd like it, I'd save it, and I'd scroll on and forget about it forever. So then I would try to take these quotes also and turn them into little songs. And once it becomes a song, it has this like living, breathing, completed concept to it. And then it would be much easier for me to pull that out of the air when I needed it, because it was just much more accessible as a song. I no longer have to think, what were the words to this thing? Like it's there. And not only are the words there, but the emotion attached to it is there. So it kind of actually functions as like a shorthand for that intention that you had, right? Like, of course, it's not like a Gana sunkar suddenly you'll like be doing all the things you want to do. But if you have that core intention, I believe, this song can just bring you back to it. And that's the way it's been working for me. And I've written them for, deep things and sometimes for very, like the song called Put Down Your Phone, just because I find myself, as we all do, right, find ourselves stuck on our phones. A song called You Don't Need It, which is for when I'm shopping endlessly for gear on Amazon and I get to my cart and I'm like, do I really? And that feeling of like, I've got to have this, it's going to be so great if I get this. And going through that loop enough times to be like, now I got it and I'm not even using it, right? And so a song to remind me of that. Um, yeah, mindset things like that. So I can
Yeah,
sing
please.
a couple of songs for you guys. In fact, I rarely sing these for people. They're generally on Instagram. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Groovy Butter. That's my artist name. And there are a bunch of these on there. Okay, how does this one go? Sorry, you'll have to give me a second to remember how to play this one. Okay, I'll try this. If it's a bit off, please forgive me. So this is the first one I ever wrote. It's called Better Than You. Right from that insecurity of like, why these, who am I? Anything you can do. No, I'll do it here. Anything you can do. Someone on the internet can do it better than you. Better than you. Just go online and you will find all the amazing people who are better than you. Now I know it sucks, but once you accept it, you can get better. Better than you were yesterday. So it's just that. It's like a little 30-second thing. And it reminds me of like of this thing of like that basic fact of, oh, you got to stop comparing yourself to everyone and focus on your own growth. And it brings me back to that feeling, through the music, at least in theory. Um, I'll play you the one about called You Don't Need It for like over shopping. You don't need it. I know you think that you do, but you don't need it. There's nothing that it can do that you can't already do with what you already have. Now I'm familiar with that particular rush, that itchy feeling like you maybe don't have enough, and that this one thing will certainly make it all change. Now I know you're feeling excited and you can barely hide it. You can feel the dopamine coursing through your veins. Well, it's always a nice distraction to get some retail therapy action. But when the boxes arrive and the feelings subside, you're still gonna be you. Just with more shit to keep in your house.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So it's there on Instagram, and you can see it. Yeah. So, but this like really helped me. The number of times I'd be in this thing, and it would remind me and of that loop, right? So yeah. So this has been like a really fun journey. Maybe I can share one more with you guys.
Yes, please.
So one that I've been, I mean, there are many at this point, but when I've been applying, there are a bunch I've written on procrastination. Those are not uploaded yet for obvious obvious reasons. Um, there's one that so there was this one day, we had some friends visiting, and we went to see a musical in Bombay. And it was a pretty, nice thing. It was The Sound of Music. I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Sound of Music. It's a musical I love, grew up loving, and this theater troupe had come from the US to perform at, you know, NMACC, and it was a very nice show. And I went to that with some people, and I just found myself finding problems with everything. Everything. I was like, somebody was talking behind me, and I was getting irritated. This person, somebody next to me was singing along with the people, and I was like, hey, who sings along with the people, on stage? The character playing Captain Von Trapp was, supposed to be an Austrian naval guy, and he was played by an American country western accented guy, and I was just getting annoyed with everything. And that day I'd been reading about like mindset programming kind of stuff. There's this guy called Joe Dispenza who talks a lot about how your personality is just a set of mental habits. And if you work on changing those habits, you can change them. So at one point, as we were coming home, I was like, wow, Gaurav, you're really good at this. Like you have honed this skill, this talent of finding what's wrong. Like so much was good today, right? You got to see this amazing musical, you were people you like and care about. And but you were, you're skilled at this. You're able to identify what is not right and fixate on that. And that gave me I really laughed. I was like, wow, that's no wonder, right? Like if you have a PhD through all these years of effort in being dissatisfied, now you have to maybe practice feeling satisfied, right? Like, and you have to be okay with that being baby steps on that, on that path. You can't just suddenly be like, of course you're going to still keep feeling dissatisfied because you've honed this, right? You've practiced this. So now to practice the other thing. So then I wrote this song called Practice Feeling Satisfied. It was a slightly longer one. I'll share this one with you. Also, please forgive me, my voice is really off today. It's extremely tired, and you just have to deal with
Your off voice is a lot better than my on voice.
it. Okay. I've got a PhD in not wanting. Hey, oh, what happened there? I've got a PhD in not wanting what I've got, developed an expertise in noticing what's not. Well, I've been practicing at a professional level at lending my ears to the devil. Maybe it's time to practice some different thoughts. So I'm gonna practice feeling satisfied. Turn up the volume on what's going right. I'm gonna cultivate the confidence that I can choose a different lens. Gonna override all my years of training. Choose the sunshine even when I feel like raining. But I'm an MVP at feeling dissatisfaction. Written my destiny by repeating the same old patterns. Gotten so darn good at feeling upset over what I think I didn't get, that the thought of contentment brings allergic reactions. So I'm gonna remember what I'm grateful for. Reframe the narrative from less to more. Gonna make adjustments to my attitude to find contentment and feel gratitude. Gonna train my brain just like a muscle and do that baby step and hustle and just practice feeling satisfied. I'm gonna practice feeling satisfied. I'm gonna practice feeling satisfied. Thank you. Again, it's much
Beautiful.
nicer if you hear the thing on Instagram because this is very like, you know.
Any plans to release an album of all these songs?
Yes, but it's being very diligently procrastinated. But yeah, the plan is there, idea is there कि करना चाहिए. But yeah, and there's a lot of them, and there's a lot actually on social media and phone usage and stuff like that, because that's stuff that I think I deal with and a lot of people deal with as well, right? And it's been pretty nice to put this stuff online and also get like some positive Like I had a friend being like, "Oh, I was going to buy a new car, then I saw your 'You Don't Need It' song, and I'm not buying the car." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice. That feels like some positive impact, you
Yeah.
know."
You're making the world a better place.
I mean, I'd like to think so, because the thing with voiceover sometimes that I question, I'm like, what value are you adding to anyone's life, right? Like that doubt also appears in my mind, right? There was a part of me that was like, you were doing like real work, you were selling things to people that they needed, and now you're just saying things and getting paid for it. So the way I sort of convinced myself, I was like, oh, you're giving people certainty about when their TV shows are going to come on air. You're giving people that, like some way to find some
Yeah.
purpose. But this definitely like feeds my soul in a different way because it's a nice way to merge my interest in songwriting and music and singing with my passion for just, I don't know, growing and I mean, which we all have, right? All of us are trying to
Yeah.
grow
Yeah.
in our own ways. It's not like that special in me, but it's a nice way for me to synergize all these thoughts and all this exploration into music. So it feels like I'm maybe somewhat uniquely positioned to do that. That's been nice. But yeah, I do definitely need to put some more effort into releasing the stuff properly and publicizing it. But yeah, it has been rewarding to
All the best
explore
with that.
this. Thank you, man.
And I'm sure a lot of people you know, will connect with these songs, including me,
Cheers,
uh,
man.
because uh, it's funny because we talked about remote work, we talked about freedom to be anywhere, we talked
Hmm.
about belongingness, and then, self development. These are the sort of pillars on which NomadGao is built.
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah,
Live,
yeah.
work, connect, belong, grow.
Hmm.
We keep talking about these every single day.
Right, right, right.
So it was interesting to have you, Gaurav,
Cheers, man.
in today's NomadGao Connect. And
My pleasure.
I'm sure there are a lot of people out there watching this live on LinkedIn and YouTube. Um, there is a bunch of stuff that they must have got from the conversation. One, I think, uh, just following your heart. A lot of people take a lot of time to make that decision, and then they don't follow through. But in your case, you did.
I mean,
Um,
so far so good, man. But it's definitely one of those things that I don't mean to pretend that it doesn't have trade-offs. Like it was very strange to live a freelancer life after, and I found myself missing my office life. Actually, the hardest part, which I had not expected, was the isolation that came in this new role. Like I had all this freedom, but a lot of loss of connection, right? And a lot of loss of community, actually. Because
right.
as much as you get tired of your office life for obvious reasons, when you're not there, you're like, oh, it was nice to just go and meet this and have a coffee and sort of have people just have that familiarity and
Right.
that sense of community of working with people. So yeah, so it
Yeah.
comes with its
That's
costs.
why we build NomadGao, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah,
people like
exactly,
you,
exactly.
digital nomads who are on the go, who miss home, miss
Yeah.
their friends back home. They just want to make new connections. And great, great man.
Cheers.
Um,
Can I demo a couple of other things that I think people
yes,
might find fun,
please.
not on the guitar, but the kinds of voiceovers that I do.
Yes, yes,
So
please.
whenever I meet people at parties, right, they're like, oh, what have we heard you in? Can you tell us something we might have heard you in? So my standard party trick is to be like, oh, these are the different channels that I voiced for. So I'll demo that for you if that's of
Please.
interest. Um, so in fact, so I'm the voice of Comedy Central in India, where I'm this super like overexcited American guy who's just super happy all the time. And so that voice sounds like The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Coming up next on Comedy Central, your happy place.
Wow.
So it's like this guy. Then I'm the voice of VH1, which is also an American accent, but it's like a much more like cool dude kind of American accent. And that goes kind of like, watch VH1 Hollywood Film Awards, powered by Renault Duster on VH1. Get with it. Something like that, right? And it's all these all caricatured voices, but it's super fun to do. Um, yeah, my Colors Infinity voice is kind of similar. I do the voices for MTV for the. Oh, I've been doing a lot of the promos for the IPL recently, which just concluded. So that was like I did a bunch from here in NomadGao also
Wow.
downstairs in my room, and that's like just super fun. Like over the top action sporty thing like, will King Kohli be able to take on, the Rajasthan Royals? Find out tonight on the IPL. Cheers. So yeah, so things like that
And the
are pretty
trumpet
fun.
sound.
I can do that. So one other fun thing I do is because I do love playing with my voice, and it's always been actually, and one other point to actually share about that's a big concern as a voice artist is vocal health is such a challenge then, right? You have to obsess over everything that affects your vocal health. You can't smoke, you drink, you'll have some mirchi, you'll have acidity, you won't be able to speak. You can't, maybe speak too loudly in social situations. You have to, like, you realize that your vocal cords are the result of everything you're doing to your body. So if you're not
And
sleeping
mine.
in, and
And mine.
yeah, and everything will show up in your voice. So that, like that's the flip side, I think, of showing up and knocking out a voiceover in 5 minutes and being done. But in order for your instrument to actually be in good shape, you really have to, it's a full-time thing. And that's also not been easy, right? That requires like a different kind of discipline. So that was also something I don't think I was prepared for. Okay, so to close this out, I will demo to you guys. I like to, when I sing, I like to do this little, anyway, we'll see. Okay, I'll sing first, and I'll do the thing. Hold me close and hold me fast. This magic spell you cast. This is La Vie en Rose. When you kiss me, heaven sighs. And though I close my eyes, I see La Vie en Rose. When you take me to your heart, I'm in a world apart, a world where roses bloom. And when you speak, angels sing from above. Everyday words seem to turn into love songs. Give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be la vie en rose.
Wow.
Give your heart and soul to me, and life will always be la vie en rose. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening, guys.
All right,
There's the
let's close this
trumpet.
and let's continue with more. Uh, Thank you all for joining in for this LinkedIn, YouTube live, as well as for all of you who came here in person from different parts of the world. And thanks, Gaurav, for
Thank
all the
you for having me,
insights
man.
about what you're doing. Very interesting, very inspiring.
And cheers, man. It's a pleasure. Thank you
Thank you.
for your interest.
Yeah. So next week, Kapil and Chavi are talking about marketing, or more specifically, how to get more clients, make more money as a coach or a freelancer. That's gonna be very helpful for a lot of people. So please join in next week. Bye bye.
Hey, thank you, guys. for showing up and listening.